afternoon, everybody. Our final session of the day is a panel discussion by three speakers joining us from Botswana. Before I introduce the topic and the three speakers, please note that there may be connectivity interruptions with Botswana. Please be patient and we will try our best to ensure that the session runs smoothly. The topic is Impact of International Norms, Regional Integration and Human Rights on Decent Work, the Botswana case study. Our three speakers, Ms. Kotsione T. Kokorwe is the Commissioner of Labour in Botswana's Ministry of Employment, Labour Productivity and Skills Development. Comrade Tusang Butale is the General Secretary of the Botswana Federation of Trade Unions. He is also a board member at Botswana National Productivity Centre. Our third speaker, Mr. Richard Vaka, is Group Employee Relations Manager at Botswana Diamond Company. He also represents Business Botswana. This is a 30-minute panel discussion. Each speaker will be allowed 6 to 7 minutes initially before I hand over to the next speaker. I will then allow the speakers a chance to respond to what the other speakers have discussed. We're going to kick off the discussion with Ms. Kotsione T. Kokorwe. I'm going to hand over to you, Ms. Kokorwe.
Thank you, Madam, and good afternoon to everyone who is in the platform. Like you have already alluded to, my name is Kokorwe Kokorwe. I'm the Commissioner of Labour here in Botswana. We are based in the headquarters in Gaborone. Maybe as a way of starting, I recognize a picture there which is not mine, which is for the former speaker. Maybe you may safely remove it. She's resting at home. Maybe as a way of starting, it's important for me to indicate that the Department of Labour's mandate is to ensure harmonious industrial relations in Botswana. And we do that through mediation of trade disputes, labor inspections, processing of workers' compensation, processing of work permits, monitoring of training and localization to ensure that at the end of the day, jobs are in the hands of locals or citizens, promoting collective bargaining, employment services, and we also do research, information and labor statistics. To zero in into the topic of the day, which is about international norms, it's important to indicate that Botswana joined the ILO in 1978. And since then, we have ratified and domesticated 15 conventions. These conventions are the 8 core conventions and 6 technical conventions and 1 governance convention. And as a member of the ILO, we strive to comply to international standards at all costs through the tripartite structures that we have. Like I said, Botswana has domesticated all the 15 conventions that we have ratified through the following pieces of legislation. We have the Employment Act, which actually governs the terms and conditions of employment, the Trade Disputes Act for the resolution of disputes, Trade Unions and Employers Organization Act, which governs the relationship of the employer and the employees' trade unionism in the country, of freedom of association in general. We have the Immigration Act for labor migration. We have the Public Service Act governing the conditions of employment in the public service. It is a sector-specific piece of legislation specific to the public service. We have the Children's Act also to deal with issues of or to protect children from abuse, all forms of abuse as required by best practice or international standards. And Botswana also holds in high regard other UN AU and SADC principles geared at promoting human rights, as labor rights are also human rights, and also as supported by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. It is also worth indicating that the Constitution of Botswana, as the supreme law in the country, is our principal law that all laws draw from. And you find that our labor laws are also required to conform or to comply with the Constitution. Are we still together, ma'am? I can see you have. Hello?
I am here. We're all here. We've just muted ourselves.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay. I was saying our Constitution is the supreme law in the country, and all laws should be seen to be aligned to the Constitution, and labor laws included. Hence the High Court in Botswana has in the past ruled that our ministry, and in particular my department, with the social partners, should work at repealing Section 45, subsection 3, 4, and Regulation 13 of the Trade Unions and Employers Organization Act, as it was found to be in violation of Section 13 of the Constitution. This section provides for freedom of association, and the repeal is also meant to align with Convention 87 on freedom of association. I'm just trying to emphasize the extent to which, as a country, these international norms are influencing our laws, and also the commitment that Botswana has to decent work as a country. And you can see that our commitments dates back before the formal declaration by the ILO of the ILO Declaration on Social Justice for a Fair Globalization, calling on all ILO members to pursue policies based on strategic objectives through the decent work agenda. Our laws were formulated way before 2008 when this declaration was made. And the declaration is around areas of employment, social protection, social dialogue, and fundamental principles and rights at work. So this was in 2008 when the declaration was adopted, but way back, or in the process, the tripartite started its consultations, and in 2011, we signed our first Decent Work Country program, and our Decent Work Country program ran from 2011 to 2015 and extended up to 2017. This is the first generation of the Decent Work Country program. It was based on 4 pillars: employment creation, social protection, tripartism, and social dialogue, workers' rights. And yes, we had our own challenges. However, I wish to indicate that there was a lot that was achieved through the Decent Work Country program. And maybe as we discuss further, I will unpack the achievements of the Decent Work Country program. And even my colleagues will, I believe they can attest to the work that we have done through the first generation of the Decent Work Country program. We signed the second one on the 18th of February this year, and work is already ongoing under the current Decent Work Country program. And fortunately or unfortunately, the signing, as I have alluded to, took place in February. And immediately, the country experienced a COVID-19 pandemic. And as we were already in the motion of consultation, we managed through social dialogue that we had already built during the consultations on the Decent Work Country program to deal with emerging issues during COVID-19. And we have enjoyed cordial engagement, and we have managed to guide the world of work through our engagement as the tripartite. We were able to develop guidelines that assisted the world of work to deal with issues of COVID-19. One may just want to highlight one or two issues that came about as a result of the COVID-19 that were not catered for by our current legislation. Nowadays, because of COVID-19, people are isolated or quarantined. All those types of absence, they are not catered for under our laws. But through guidance of the tripartite, the employers and employees have been encouraged to dialogue to see how they deal with all these types of emerging issues. We were having issues of transportation because government restricted movements. We had all those organizations or companies that were closed because the government's intention was to contain the disease. As such, like the bars or the liquor industry, they were instructed to close their areas. As you may know, that it would be very difficult to deal with somebody who has taken some substance. If you are to make them to put on those masks or to make them to decongest, it is not going to be easy because they're already under the influence of something. So those were the measures that were taken to contain the disease, but the measures also resulted in some problems for the world of work. But like I said, we were able to deal with them through social dialogue under the Decent Work Country program. As I draw closer to concluding my remarks, let me talk to the ongoing labor law reforms. And the labor law reforms are very advanced, they're at an advanced stage. It has been a long process of consultation, and I'm happy to say the ILO was behind us. They supported us with a dedicated consultant to guide the process. And one may also want to emphasize that the laws under review are the Employment Act, the Trade Disputes Act, the Trade Unions and Employers Organization Act, and the Public Service Act. And why are we reviewing the laws? We are reviewing these laws to align with international standards. We don't want to be found to be wanting in relation to international standards. And like I said earlier, some of our courts have already pronounced that we have to do something to our laws, and we are aligning to such judgments, and we are also closing the gaps that we realize as we implement the law. And on that note, I wish to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kokorwe. I'm sure we will come back to you for some concluding remarks. I want to then move on to Mr. Richard Vaka. Can you share your views with us?
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you. You can continue.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, Ms. Kokorwe has taken a lot of the stuff that I was going to cover, which will make my discussion much easier. From the business, first of all, I would like to say I'm no longer working for the Botswana, so I'm no longer Group Employee Relations Manager. I'm just an independent consultant, but I'm still representing Business Botswana on employment and labor relations issues. So, but I will draw a lot of my observations from my 35 years of working with the Botswana, you know, the influence of ILO policy on policy formulation. Botswana is a minimalist state, or used to be a minimalist state. There was hardly any changes in law. When I joined the Botswana, women couldn't work in the mines, they couldn't work shifts. The unintended consequences was that if you want to hire a typist, there used to be typists, it was a professional job at the time. There was hardly any man who could go to the mine, so you actually have to go and hire a guy when there's so many ladies who could tie, just to go and train them so that they could do typing. But I think 1992, there was a major reform in terms of labor law, in terms of equality of employment, also equality of pay. All those things were influenced by the ILO, even though the conventions were not ratified. So the other influence that has really influenced Botswana is actually being a neighbor to South Africa, and also the coming of independence in Namibia, which had a modern constitution where it was very clear that labor standards or labor rights were recognized in the constitution. In Botswana, there's a legal section 1318 that actually recognized trade unionism. And then also you find that the influence, because South Africa took a lot, and Namibia, they took a lot of international standards in terms of labor law. And we also have the common law, which applies to all these three countries. And, you'll find that most of the advocates, some of the judges, some of the presidents, as the South Africa interpreted their laws, they were slowly moved into Botswana. And also it so happened that there are some of these codes of good practices which were developed in South Africa, they were persuasive. And I think one of the most profound effect was when the industrial court was found, the first judge came from South Africa. And he really, he's late now, may his soul rest in peace. He actually brought in a lot of the labor standards, especially when it comes to termination of employment. Right now, Botswana has not ratified Convention 158. But, if you look at all the terminations of employment, whether it's retrenchment, whether it's ill health, incapacity, it's actually drawn from that convention. Because I once asked the judge, I said, but, Botswana has not ratified it. He said, on the other hand, as a member of the ILO, as a judge, where there's a lacuna, what is the right word to say? Where there's a gap in the law, I draw from the international law, since it's very clear that when the industrial court was set, it was set as a court of law and equity. So through the equity jurisdiction, you'll find that in a way the courts moved ahead of the government, sorry to say that. So though, and also you'll find that a lot of the as South Africa interpreted the, in South Africa, the law, I think when it happened in 1994, everything became a human rights issue, and then a rights-based interpretation. How do you do the interpretation, including the label? Some of those also had, I would say, an impact on Botswana. From a business perspective, it's actually, because you, especially, I'm talking maybe from the bigger business, you compete internationally. It's easier when the laws are harmonized. When you have got a policy that applies in that country, you come to that. You don't really have to change that much to adapt the law or to formulate your policy, because we don't do the law, we just do our policy suite. So in terms of the alignment, so it actually helps businesses to practice so that we can also, have people moving across borders and also adapting your policies. So the other issue that came in Botswana, I think when you're all aware that really, strictly speaking, there's no ILO convention that actually gives the right to strike. But through the committee of experts, when they do the interpretation, they've actually found that it's actually essential in order for collective bargaining. But I think when Botswana came to that, when they actually legislated, there was a bit of I think I would say our counterparts, the unions, tried it. It was a bit misunderstood, and there were some really adverse consequences. I think culminating in the 2010 or 2011 strike, where the legislature tried to change the laws, trying to restrict that. But I think in the current reform is that the current reforms are actually trying to rectify that because of the other consequences that fall from that. So there's also this issue of, for small businesses, because you now have got a court. I think maybe us consultants were guilty, or the lawyers, the whole thing becomes very legalized. So when you have to chair hearings, you need an independent chairperson, and you find that for smaller companies, there are not enough people. So, and also the whole proceduralization, and it increases the cost of doing businesses. But I hope that going forward, we'll try to recognize that, some of those issues at the core of employment is a relationship. Okay, there's a legal issue, but there's a relationship, but we need to not to over proceduralize, over legalize the issue of labor laws. We need to actually realize that, you know, the relationship between the employer and the employees can be terminated, you know, but there should be fairness, but we shouldn't actually become too legalistic, because even the employees find it very difficult if this whole thing's taken over by the lawyers. I think Mrs. Kokorwe has actually highlighted that we are currently in the process of reviewing the labor laws, going review. From a business perspective, it's a bit frustrating. This thing has been going on for so long. I keep on asking him, what's going on? When are we going to get the changes in the laws? Because as a consultant, you keep on asking the business, what's happened? No, we are reviewing the laws. But if you have been saying this for the last 2-3 years, I mean, well, you know, it becomes difficult to keep on saying we are reviewing. But I hope that maybe we will review the laws. And because I mean, it is modern, it is actually so that business can actually start preparing for the new standards and start so that they don't keep on violating the laws. Going forward, I really won't speculate and say what I see, because I think this review, if it comes into effect, unless if Parliament in its own discretion, they change what the tripartite labor law review committee have done, I think the Botswana will be more aligned to the ILO. What I want to emphasize is that aligning to the ILO is also aligning to the region. It's also aligning to the global practice of business, which can only be good for business. Thank you. I won't go any further.
Thank you, Mr. Vaka. Comrade Butale, are you still with us? Are you happy to begin?
Yes, thank you, because I had wanted to do my video, but I know it will give us challenges in terms of connectivity.
Sure, you can proceed.
Yes, my name is Tusam Butale. I'm the Secretary General of Botswana Federation of Trade Union. It's a federation in Botswana, having been formed in 1977. We are over 42 years now in operation. And my colleagues, I have actually said most of the things that I needed to cover, which is a good thing, because I know sometimes business has a tendency of going off the road. But I'm glad he focused. Thank you, Mr. Vaka. I just wanted to start by saying Botswana, in terms of adherence to the ILO international standards, it's one of the countries which tries to follow the international standards and the conventions. And these conventions have actually been very helpful in ensuring that Botswana has something that it follows in terms of its labor law reviews, in terms of formulation of its decent work country program, which we signed the second generation in February, having gone through the first generation from 2011 to 2015 and extension from 2015 to 2018. What we had seen as challenges, I'm sure the commissioner alluded to, there were challenges, but there were also positives that can be drawn from the first generation. As we look forward to the second generation, which has been impeded somewhat by the COVID-19 pandemic so far. And going on to the formulation of the decent work, it's good to note that it was formulated with assistance from the ILO as well. And they played a very critical role in ensuring that it was done and properly signed this year. I would also want to touch on areas which my colleagues did not touch on, which include the problem that we have as labor, because in terms of following the international labor standards, the Industrial Court of Botswana duly follows the international labor standards and the conventions in its judgments. But we have a problem in Botswana which we can't run away from. We have a problem of parallel jurisdiction between the High Court and the Industrial Court. The High Court being a court of law and the Industrial Court being a court of equity and law. So the problem that we've seen as labor and the problem that's causing us a big headache is the fact that when you go to the High Court with a labor case, it's going to be judged only on law. And workers don't normally get a raw deal because when you go to the High Court, the court will just, for instance, when you are unfairly dismissed, it will just give you a 1 month benefit. But if you go to the industrial court, because it's a court of equity and law, you tend to get the equity aspect in how the judges deal with the case. Now, the problem would now come when we have to go to the to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal for some time has been leaning towards just being a court of law. And most of the judgments that we've seen, including a recent judgment, which is as early as 2 weeks ago, 2 to 3 weeks ago, they are actually leaving the equity part. And this becomes very detrimental to workers because you can have workers now having judgments from the Court of Appeal, which are giving them less than what the industrial court would have ordinarily given them in their judgments. So we've seen this problem, and it's one of the problems that we are really trying hard to address through the labor law review. And we also see a window of opportunity because we can't change the setup that we have currently because of the Constitution of Botswana and how it sets up the courts and the Court of Appeal. But in the recent State of the Nation address, the President of Botswana indicated that beginning of next year, 2021, we'll be starting the process of reviewing the Constitution of Botswana. And as labor, we view it as a very big opportunity, which we've already started preparing for, so that we can lobby for certain laws to be changed from the Constitution itself. So this is one of the reviews that we are looking for going forward. In 2011, as Mr. Vaka has said, we had the first major public service strike. And as a result of that, in 2015, we saw the schedule relating to essential services being amended. It was essentially the amendment of the Trade Dispute Act, which was done without consultation with labor, though we had very pertinent issues that we raised against the bill. Parliament passed it, and in 2016, a new Trade Dispute Act was passed into law, which basically made everybody essential. And this led to the reports that we made to the International Labour Organization. And we had the conclusions which were made in 2018. And one of the conclusions was that government was asked to review the labor laws in Botswana. And when we came back from the ILO having that conclusion, we noted that the TDA was left out, but we engaged the Ministry of Employment, Labor, Productivity and Skills Development, and the then minister was able to get the go-ahead for the TDA to be included in the labor law review. So we essentially had the Employment Act, the Public Service Act.
Hello?
Hello?
We appear, Comrade Butale seems to be having issues with his connectivity. I did mention at the beginning of the session that we are experiencing some connectivity interruptions.
Yeah.
Ms. Kokorwe, Mr. Vaka, do you have anything that you would like to add on to what the previous speakers have discussed? Perhaps we can start.
Hello, yes, I think, oh, is that
I went off.
with Mrs. Kokorwe? Okay, it's fine. Oh, no.
We can hear what you have to say. Yes.
Yeah, I thought Mr. Butale is back. Maybe you can allow him to conclude.
Sure.
Yes, I was just about to conclude because before I was interrupted by the network.
Sure.
I don't know where I left the issues that I was talking to, but I was basically just giving an update on the labor law review to say it's at the far end. We hope that we will be able to conclude because during our last meeting, We then just needed the last part to say what were the challenges, what were the new challenges brought about by the COVID-19, so that we make sure that the laws are alive to such issues. But in terms of what I wanted to say, it's basically just that, because I only have 5 minutes. And one of the issues that we noted from the standards, which we believe Botswana needs to be alive to, is the issue of occupational health and safety. Because during this period, we've seen it's one of the critical issues that our laws do not fully cover. And the issue that was mentioned by the commissioner, that most of our laws were made before certain declarations were made, is also a challenge, because it means our laws have other aspects that they leave out, which are there in the declarations and were noted in recent standards. So we need to relook at the laws that we have, because they leave out very pertinent issues, occupational health and safety being one of the critical issues that we as Labour are concerned about. Thank you. I hope I did not take too much of my 5-10 minutes.
That's perfect. Thank you, comrade. Ms. Kokorwe, would you like to add anything, having heard what your fellow panelists have had to say?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. You can go ahead.
I don't have much to say, but I just want to say or to thank the ILO and its structures, including ourselves as the tripartite structures, for the foresight of the decent work agendas. Because right now it is clear that, or it is evident that the decent work country programs are going to be the platforms that we will ride on to deal with emerging issues. And we can see that COVID-19 has accelerated us to the fourth industrial revolution. And we can only ride on our country programs to deal with emerging issues that have been brought about by the COVID-19. If I may just cite one example that is currently, we are currently presented with, the issue of working from home. Should I say working from home or working from anywhere? And we can see that through social dialogue, we need to sit down and engage rigorously to see how we are managing this working from everywhere that is presenting us today. So I'm just thankful for the foresight of the ILO family, and also just to thank the tripartite here in Botswana for the working relationship. We are where we are today because of the constructive engagement that we are having. And we are having these difficult conversations in all honesty and good faith, with a view to take our country forward. The review of labor laws is going to benefit all of us. It is not like government is in any way going to resist, because this is for the benefit of our economy as a country. So as a ministry, we are committed to all the processes. We are committed to the labor law review. We are committed to the decent work agenda to take our country forward. And I want to believe this is the commitment of the region, SADC. I've interacted with colleagues in the region. This is the commitment of Africa as a region. And I believe we are all feeding into the bigger picture that is compliance to labor standards. And to, at the end of the day, attain human rights for our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kokorwe. Mr. Vaka, is there anything else that you would want to add on?
Hello, yes, thank you. Mine is just a brief note. I think I would like us to continue, but what I would like really to see is that the government recognize that in Botswana, the government is the major employer. So They should also comply to ILO standards. They can't expect us as business Botswana to comply when they don't. Same standards, because that would really go a long way. You know, they can't just legislate for others, but they should also realize that these standards apply to the government as well. That's my brief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our speakers for an informative and interactive discussion. As we wrap up, I want to thank all the speakers and the delegates for your attendance and your participation in the first day of the third conference of the African Labour Law Society. We appreciate your patience as we navigate this relatively new territory of virtual conferencing. And we look forward to continuing with you all at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for a session on multinational corporations in Africa. It will be presented by Mr. Alex Nkosi. So we'll see you all bright and early at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.